The night was blacker than the inside of a grave. 35 meters beneath the surface of the Philippine Sea, the Imperial Japanese Navy submarine I-58 slid forward like a shark that had learned patience. Inside her pressure hull, the only sounds were the soft click of valves, the low thrum of diesels on the snorkel, and the measured breathing of men who knew they might never see Japan again. At the periscope stand stood Lieutenant Commander Mochitsura Hashimoto, 36 years old, slight of build, eyes the color of wet slate. His white uniform cap was pushed back on his close-cropped head, and the faint scar that ran from the corner of his left eyebrow to the bridge of his nose caught the red glow of the control room lamp. To the Americans he would soon hunt, he was an unknown quantity. To the men crammed into I-58, he was the samurai of the deep, heir to a naval tradition older than the empire itself. A man who had already survived 4 war patrols and who still believed in the old virtues, loyalty, courage, and an almost spiritual devotion to duty. Hashimoto had been born in 1909 in Kyoto, the ancient capital where cherry blossoms drifted across temple roofs and the air smelled of incense and old wood. His father, a Shinto priest, had taught him that a man's life was not his own but belonged to something larger: family, nation, emperor. When the boy was 12, his father took him to the great shrine at Ise and made him swear an oath on the sacred mirror that he would live without regret. Young Mochitsura had not understood the full weight of the vow then, but the words had lodged in his marrow like shrapnel. He entered Etajima, the Japanese Annapolis, in 1927. There he learned the craft of the submarine, a weapon the Imperial Navy had embraced with the fervor of a convert. In the cramped training boats of the 1930s, he discovered that he was born for the dark, narrow world beneath the waves. While classmates dreamed of battleships and glory on the surface, Hashimoto felt most alive when the sea pressed in from every side and the only light came from the glow of instruments. By the time war exploded across the Pacific, he was already a seasoned officer. His first command, the Row 31, had been small and obsolete, but he had coaxed miracles from her. In 1942, he took I-14 on a daring run through the Solomons, slipping past American destroyers to land commandos on Guadalcanal. In 1943, he commanded I-24 on the long voyage that delivered midget submarines to Sydney Harbor. Each time he returned, the rising sun flag on the conning tower bore another victory pennant. Each time he came back thinner, quieter, as though a little more of his soul had been left beneath the sea. In the spring of 1944, the High Command gave him I-58, a new B-3 type cruiser submarine, 108 meters long, capable of 20 knots on the surface and armed with 6 torpedo tubes. She was the finest boat Hashimoto had ever conned, and he treated her like a living thing. The crew called her Hashimoto's sword. By the summer of 1945, the war had become a slow hemorrhage. The Marianas were gone, the Philippines lost, Okinawa fallen. American carrier planes roamed at will, and the once proud combined fleet had been reduced to burning wrecks. Yet the submarine force still struck back. The Kaiten program, human torpedoes ridden to their targets by young pilots eager for a beautiful death, had become the last hope of the undersea arm. Hashimoto hated the Kaiten with every fiber of his being. He had seen too many boys, barely 20 years old, climb into the steel coffins with smiles on their faces and tears in their mother's letters tucked inside their flight suits. But orders were orders. and 6 kaiten were welded to the deck of I-58 when she sailed from Kure on 16 July 1945. Hashimoto's final mission was simple on paper. Proceed to the sea lanes between Guam and Leyte Gulf, attack enemy shipping, expend all weapons, and die gloriously if necessary. The High Command no longer spoke of victory, they spoke only of honor. For 12 days, I-58 prowled the empty ocean. The Americans had grown wary, routing their convoys far to the east, and the few targets Hashimoto found were too fast or too well escorted. The kaiten pilots grew restless. One of them, Ensign Kazusa Ota, only 22, asked permission every day to launch. Hashimoto refused. He would not throw away lives on shadows.
Then, shortly before midnight on 29 July 1945, the radar operator reported a contact. A single large ship, zigzagging at 12 knots, no escorts. Hashimoto brought I-58 to periscope depth and raised the night scope. There, silhouetted against the low moon, steamed a heavy cruiser of the Portland class, guns dark, running without zigzag now, confident in the emptiness of the sea. Hashimoto's heart beat once, hard, like a temple drum. He knew the silhouette. USS Indianapolis. He had studied her lines in the recognition manuals. 12 8-inch guns, fast, dangerous, and alone. He turned to his torpedo officer, Lieutenant Ryusuke Nomura. Conventional torpedoes, 6 fish, spread pattern. Nomura hesitated. Commander, the kaiten. No. The single word cracked like a whip. We are submariners, not butchers of children. The crew moved with the silent efficiency of men who had drilled 1,000 times. Hashimoto watched the chronometer, calculating the Americans' base course, speed, and the exact moment when the range would be perfect. At 0012 on 30 July, he gave the order. Fire 1, fire 2, fire 3. The submarine shuddered as the Type 95 torpedoes leapt from the tubes. Hashimoto kept the scope trained on the target. 1 minute, 1 minute 30, 2 minutes. At 0014, the sea erupted. 2, perhaps 3 hits amidships. A tower of flame shot skyward, turning night into orange noon. The Indianapolis seemed to lift bodily out of the water, then settled back, mortally wounded. Secondary explosions followed, ammunition and aviation fuel cooking off in her guts. Hashimoto watched, dry-mouthed, as the great cruiser took on a fatal list. He could have surfaced and finished her with the deck gun. He could have launched the kaiten and claimed a heroic kill. Instead, he ordered, dive, 100 meters, rig for silent running. As I-58 slid beneath the burning ship, Hashimoto felt no elation, only a vast, hollow sadness. Somewhere on that cruiser were more than 1,000 men who would never see morning. He thought of the oath he had sworn at Ise, of the sacred mirror, of his father's quiet voice, live without regret. He did not know, could not know, that the Indianapolis had delivered the atomic bomb components to Tinian only days before. He did not know that her sinking would become the worst sea disaster in American naval history, that nearly 900 men would die in the water, devoured by sharks or driven mad by thirst and salt. He only knew that he had done his duty, perfectly, mercilessly. I-58 escaped the area without detection. For 2 more weeks she prowled, low on battery, lower on hope. The kaiten pilots begged to be allowed to die. Hashimoto kept them alive. On 15 August, the Emperor's voice crackled over the radio, announcing surrender. The war was over. Hashimoto brought I-58 home through a silent sea. When they tied up at Kure, the kaiten pilots wept openly on the casing. They had been denied even the consolation of a beautiful death. At the war crimes trials in 1946, the Americans demanded Hashimoto's head. Captain Charles McVeigh of the Indianapolis had been court-martialed for negligence. The prosecution needed a villain. Hashimoto was brought to Washington in chains. He stood erect in the dock, still wearing the white uniform he had worn the night of the attack, now threadbare and salt-stained. Under cross-examination, he spoke quietly, precisely. "Did you know the Indianapolis was unarmed?" "No." "Did you know she carried no escorts?" "No. My orders were to attack enemy warships." "Commander, do you feel remorse for the deaths of nearly 900 American sailors?" Hashimoto considered the question for a long moment. Then he answered in perfect, accented English. "I feel sorrow for all men who die in war. American, Japanese, it makes no difference. The sea takes everyone the same." The courtroom was silent. Even the prosecutors seemed taken aback by the calm dignity of the man they had come to condemn. He was sentenced to death, but the sentence was commuted. In 1950, he walked free.
For the rest of his life, Mochitsura Hashimoto carried the weight of that night. He became a Shinto priest like his father, tending a small shrine in Kyoto where he prayed daily for the souls of the men who had died on both sides. American survivors of the Indianapolis visited him over the years. Some came in anger. Some came in sorrow. A few came in forgiveness. He received them all with the same grave courtesy. In 1990, 55 years after the sinking, a delegation of Indianapolis survivors invited him to their reunion in Indianapolis itself. The old submariner, now 81, frail but still ramrod straight, accepted. At the banquet, he stood before hundreds of gray-haired Americans and spoke through an interpreter. "I was your enemy once. War made us enemies, but the sea made us brothers. Tonight, I drink to the memory of your comrades, and I ask that you drink to the memory of mine." There was not a dry eye in the hall. Mochitsura Hashimoto died on 25 October 2000, at peace with the gods and, at last, with himself. In his desk drawer was found a single photograph, the rising sun flag of I-58, its victory pennants fluttering, taken on the day she returned from her last patrol. On the back, in his neat calligraphy, he had written, "Silent the ocean. Torpedoes sleep in their tubes. Cherry blossoms fall." The samurai sub-commander had lived without regret.